"You're too sensitive," she said after kissing another guy as a joke at the party. So I stopped reacting to anything she did. Now she's fired, friendless, and my silence is all she has left. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. The bass from the speakers thumped against my ribs like a second, a rhythmic heartbeat. I leaned against the wall, a red Solo cup of warm beer in my hand, trying to look like I was having fun. Chloe's world was always like this, loud, bright, and constantly in motion. For 3 years, I'd been the steady anchor in her storm, the one who remembered to buy more toilet paper and knew how to fix her laptop when it crashed. But in rooms like this, I always felt like a piece of furniture, present, but entirely forgettable. Across the room, Chloe was holding court. Her laugh, a sharp, crystalline sound, cut through the din as she animatedly told a story, her hands flying. Standing a little too close was Derek, her just a friend from work. He was everything I wasn't. Effortlessly loud, dressed in a tight shirt that showed off a gym-honed physique, and he hung on her every word with a smirk that suggested he was in on a joke the rest of the world wasn't. See? He gets it. Chloe had told me more than once. He doesn't overthink everything. He just lives. I took a sip of the bad beer. I was overthinking now. The way his hand lingered on her arm. The way she threw her head back, exposing her throat as she laughed at something he whispered. It was a familiar, gnawing feeling in my gut that I'd learned to dismiss as my own insecurity. Don't be so sensitive, Mark. I pushed off the wall and headed for the kitchen, needing a moment of quiet. I dumped the beer in the sink, the suds fizzing out a sad death. As I turned to get some water, I heard a sudden surge of cheers and whistles from the living room. A pit opened in my stomach. I walked back to the doorway and froze. The crowd had formed a half circle. In the center, under the glittering disco ball, Chloe was locked in a passionate, theatrical kiss with Derek. It wasn't a peck. It wasn't a joke. It was a full-bodied, hands-in-hair, lost-in-the-moment kiss that seemed to stretch for an eternity. The cheering of her friends was the soundtrack to my quiet, internal shattering. Then, someone noticed me. The cheers faltered, then died, leaving only the thumping music. The circle awkwardly parted. Chloe broke the kiss, her face flushed. She saw me. For a single, horrifying second, her eyes held a flicker of something real, guilt, panic. Then, it was gone, replaced by a performative, nervous laugh. "Oh my God, Mark," she giggled, waving a hand dismissively as if shooing a fly. "Your face. It was a dare. We lost a bet. Lighten up." Derek slung a proprietary arm around her shoulders, a smug grin plastered on his face. "Yeah, man. Don't be so sensitive. It's just a bit of fun." The words hung in the air, toxic and familiar. I felt every eye in the room on me, waiting for my reaction. The hurt, jealous boyfriend. The punchline. I didn't give it to them. My voice was low, quieter than the music, but it cut through the room with the sharpness of a blade. "I'm not laughing." Chloe's smirk vanished. Her eyes, once sparkling with laughter, hardened into chips of ice. She took a step forward, disentangling herself from Derek, her focus now entirely on me, but not in a good way. "You never do," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "That's the problem. You're always so serious. You're too sensitive. You're killing the vibe and embarrassing me." There it was. The final twist of the knife. My feelings, my very valid, very human reaction to watching my girlfriend cheat on me in public, were now the problem. I was the embarrassment. I was the one killing her fun. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the girl I'd loved, the one I'd planned a future with, standing there in a room full of people, telling me I was defective for having a functioning heart. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It just switched off. I didn't say another word. I turned my back on her, on Derek, on the entire gaping crowd, and walked to the coat closet. I retrieved my jacket with steady hands, slid it on, and walked out the front door into the cool, quiet night. The silence was a blessing. The drive home was conducted in a vacuum. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't scream. I just drove, my mind perfectly, terrifyingly blank. I was sitting on our living room couch in the dark when she got home hours later. The only light came from the street lamp outside, painting long, skeletal shadows across the floor. I heard her key fumble in the lock, her steps unsteady as she kicked off her heels. "Mark," she called out, her voice slurry from drink. "Are you sulking in the dark like a vampire?" She flipped the light switch, blinking in the sudden brightness. She was still riding the high from the party, defensive and ready for a fight. She expected tears. She expected yelling. She was prepared to win an argument about my fragility. I just sat there, looking at her. "Are you seriously still on about this?" she sighed, dropping her purse on the floor with a thud. "It was nothing. You are blowing this so far out of proportion it's insane." I remained silent, my hands resting on my knees. "Calm. See? This is what I'm talking about," she exploded, gesturing wildly. "The silent treatment. So childish. You're so insecure. I can't walk on eggshells around my own friends. Derek is just a fun guy. He doesn't overanalyze everything like you do." I finally spoke, my voice even and devoid of all emotion. "Was the tongue part of the bet too?" She stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. My calmness was throwing her script. "What is that supposed to mean? What do you want me to do, Mark? Grovel?" "It was a joke. You're right," I said. A triumphant, vindicated look flashed across her face. "Finally, you see, you shouldn't have to walk on eggshells," I continued, cutting her off. "And I shouldn't have to explain why watching my girlfriend kiss another man is hurtful. This isn't a negotiation about my feelings. They're not wrong." The triumph on her face curdled into confusion, then frustration. "So what? You're breaking up with me over a joke? You're that fragile?" I didn't answer. I stood up, and for a second, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. She thought I might hit her, or finally break down. Instead, I walked past her, down the hall to the spare bedroom, and closed the door. The soft, definitive click of the latch was louder than any scream. The conversation was over. The relationship was over. Inside the room, the composure held. I didn't cry. I didn't punch the wall. I took out my phone. My thumb hovered over her name in my contacts. Every fiber of my being, every sensitive part she had mocked, screamed to text her, to beg, to try and make her understand the pain. My fingers trembled as I typed out a furious, heartbroken paragraph. "How could you? I love you." Was it all a lie? The words were a hot, messy torrent of everything I was feeling. And then, I read them. I saw the desperate, pleading man in those words. The man she would call too sensitive. I took a deep, shuddering breath. And I deleted the message. Every single word. I watched the cursor blink on an empty screen. It was the first victory. The next morning, I moved with a methodical silence that seemed to unnerve Chloe more than any shouting ever could. She hovered in the doorway of the bedroom as I packed, her arms crossed, her expression a volatile mix of anger and confusion. "You're really leaving? Over this?" she repeated, her voice laced with incredulity. "You're going to throw away 3 years because you can't take a joke?" I didn't look at her. I folded a sweater, placed it in the suitcase, and reached for another. The rhythm of the task, fold, place, reach, was a meditation. It kept the void at bay. "You're being crazy," she pressed, her voice rising. "You need to get over this." I finally zipped the suitcase closed and stood it upright. I looked at her then, and I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes as she registered the emptiness in mine. There was no love, no hate, no conflict. It was just nothing. "The lease is in your name," I said, my tone as flat and factual as a news report. "I've paid my share through the end of the month. My lawyer will be in touch about the few shared assets." I walked past her, rolling the suitcase behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. I got in my car and drove to Leo's apartment, where my friend had already made up the couch without asking a single question. I blocked Chloe's number. I deleted her from all social media. I became a ghost. The first week was the hardest. The silence I had cultivated around myself began to feel suffocating. One evening, at Leo's sink, I was washing a coffee mug she'd bought me as a joke gift. It read, "World's okayest boyfriend." A memory flashed, unbidden, her laughing as she gave it to me pretending to be offended, then her kissing me and saying, "I'm kidding, you're the best." The memory was so vivid, so warm, that it felt like a physical blow. A single, hot tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek, dripping into the soapy water. I quickly wiped my face with my sleeve, my jaw tight. This was the sensitivity she'd mocked. This was the part of me that had to die. But I didn't want it to die. I just needed to transmute it. I remembered the old woodworking tools gathering dust in my parents' garage. It was a hobby I'd loved in high school, one Chloe had ridiculed. "It's so slow," she'd said once, watching me fix a chair. "And messy. All that sawdust. Don't you have better things to do?" I didn't anymore. I rented a small, sunlit unit in an industrial complex, a workshop. The first time I stepped inside, the smell of fresh pine and sawdust was like a balm. I bought a rough slab of walnut, its grain a beautiful, chaotic map. I started with hand tools, the rhythmic scraping of the plane, the gentle tap-tap-tap of the chisel. There was no room for overthinking here. The wood would tell you what it needed. It demanded patience. It demanded respect. My hands, which had felt so useless holding that red Solo cup, now became instruments of creation. Sawdust coated my arms and clung to my sweat. It was a purposeful mess. For hours at a time, the only sound was the whisper of the sander and the focus of my own breathing. The swirling, chaotic thoughts in my head began to settle, matching the smooth, polished surface of the wood. I wasn't just building a coffee table. I was building a new foundation for myself, piece by piece, shaving away the soft, wounded parts until something hard and beautiful emerged. Meanwhile, in my absence, Chloe's world began to rot from the inside out. At work, still reeling from my silent departure, she became reckless. She was chasing the high she'd lost, trying to prove to Derek and her remaining friends that she was still the fun, vibrant queen of her domain. They were pitching for the Anderson account, a massive, traditional family-owned business. It was the kind of client that could make a career. I knew this because she'd complained about them for weeks. "They're so stuffy, Mark," she'd moaned. "The son, the one taking over, is a total dinosaur. No vision. You have to handle them with kid gloves." I told her then handle them with kid gloves. Don't try to force your disruptive ideas on them. Listen, she'd rolled her eyes. Don't be so sensitive. It's just corporate politics. Now, in a bar after work, trying to impress Derek and a few colleagues, she let her guard down. Flushed with cocktails and the need to be the center of attention, she started to gossip. "The Anderson presentation is in the bag," she boasted, leaning into Derek. "The old man is senile, and the son is a pushover. We're going to pitch the rebel campaign. They'll hate it, but we'll talk them into it. They don't have a choice. We have all the data." She then divulged a key piece of their strategy, a confidential pricing model and a perceived weakness in the Anderson family's internal dynamics that they planned to exploit. It was the kind of insider information that was not just unprofessional, but dangerously so. She dismissed the worried look from a junior colleague with a wave. "Relax. It's just industry gossip. Don't be so sensitive." Derek, who saw everything as a game, repeated the juicy details to a friend at a rival firm, bragging about his girlfriend's inside track. The leak was traced back to Chloe within days. The Anderson family, a pillar of old-school integrity, was apoplectic. They pulled their multi-million-dollar account immediately and very publicly, issuing a scathing statement about the firm's unethical culture and profound lack of discretion. Chloe was summoned to a partner's office and fired for gross misconduct and breach of confidentiality. She was escorted from the building, her career in tatters. The social dominoes fell next. Her friend Stacy, who had been at the fateful party, saw the whole sordid picture come together. She met Chloe for what would be the last time. "You called Mark sensitive for being upset you kissed Derek?" Stacy said, her voice cold with disgust. "Then you get fired for the same careless, drama-loving behavior? We're all too sensitive to be around this train wreck. Don't call us again." The friend group, built on the shallow foundation of fun and gossip, dissolved overnight. She was utterly alone. The final blow came from Derek. With Chloe now jobless, emotionally needy, and a social pariah, he lost interest overnight. When she showed up at his apartment crying, he didn't even let her in. He stood in the doorway, looking bored. "Look, Chloe, this was fun for a bit," he said, checking his phone. "But it's gotten way too heavy. You're a lot of drama. You know that." "Drama?" she sobbed. "You were part of this. We." He gave her a dismissive smirk, a perfect mirror of her own from the party. "It was just a bit of fun. Don't be so sensitive about it." He closed the door in her face. The echo of her own weaponized words was the killing stroke. She was now jobless, friendless, and completely discarded, left standing in the hollow silence of the consequences she had so carelessly set in motion. The silence I had built around myself became my fortress. I focused on my work, my woodworking, and the quiet, steady rhythm of my new life. The coffee table was finished, a stunning, live-edge piece of walnut, polished to a deep, warm glow. It was solid. It was real. It wouldn't gaslight me or call me names. Then, the first breach in the walls came. A text from an unknown number, but I knew it was her. Unknown number. 11:34 p.m. Mark, I know you probably hate me, but I lost my job. The Anderson account. Everything is falling apart. I miss you. I read the words. I felt nothing. No schadenfreude, no pity. It was like reading a news headline about a stranger in a distant country. I swiped the notification away. The next day, a voicemail. Her voice was thick with tears, slurred slightly by wine or despair. Voicemail. Please, just talk to me. I made a huge mistake. Derek was a loser. You were right about everything. I see that now. I'm so sorry. It's all such a mess, please. I deleted it. A week later, another text. Unknown number. My mom said she saw you at the grocery store. You look good. I can't stop crying. I need my best friend. The audacity of that phrase, my best friend, after she had eviscerated me in public, almost sparked a reaction. Almost. I took a deep breath and visualized the grain of the walnut, the smooth, unyielding surface. I did not respond. Then, her flying monkey arrived. Stacy, her enabler-in-chief. Stacy. Hey Mark, I know what she did was messed up, but she's really suffering. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive her? She's learned her lesson. This time, I did reply. It was the only response any of them would get. I typed out a single, unambiguous sentence. Mark, do not contact me again. The silence that followed was brief, and it was the calm before the storm. The real Chloe, the one hidden beneath the performative tears, finally emerged. The text came in a rapid, furious volley. Unknown number. Fine. I get it. Unknown number. You're just a cold, heartless bastard. Unknown number. You're happy about this, aren't you? You're enjoying watching me suffer. Unknown number. You're just using this as an excuse because you're too weak to handle a real woman with a personality. There they were. Her true colors, blazing in high-definition fury. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she was facing consequences. I wasn't a person to her. I was an audience for her performance, and I had committed the ultimate sin of walking out of the theater. I screenshotted the messages, saved them in a folder labeled Closure, and blocked the number. The fortress walls were now impenetrable. The invitation to Leo's gallery opening was a welcome distraction. It was a small, sophisticated affair for a local sculptor he represented. The air was clean, smelling of white wine and stone dust, a world away from sticky floors and cheap beer. I stood with Sarah, the landscape architect I'd been seeing for a few months. We'd met at a park where I was sketching furniture ideas. She was studying the topography for a project. She was quiet, observant, and her eyes held a deep, intelligent calm. She was appreciating a bronze sculpture, her finger gently tracing the line of its form in the air. It's the artist's sensitivity to the material I love, she was saying to me. He's not forcing it. He's collaborating with it. I smiled. It was a real, easy smile. I know exactly what you mean. And then, I felt it, a shift in the air, a toxic frequency entering the room. I didn't need to turn around to know she was there. Chloe looked like a ghost of her former self. Her clothes were slightly rumpled, her hair lacked its usual sharp style, and her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She moved through the crowd with a desperate energy, her gaze locking onto me like a homing beacon. She walked right up to us, ignoring Sarah completely. Mark, she said, her voice a strained whisper. Please, we need to talk. I turned. My expression didn't change. It was the same polite, neutral mask I'd use for a server in a restaurant. Chloe, I didn't know you'd be here. Her composure broke. A tear escaped and traced a path through her foundation. Please, she begged, her voice cracking with a raw, genuine agony I had never heard before. I lost everything. My job, my friends. I was so wrong. I was stupid and cruel, and I destroyed the best thing I ever had. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was the apology I had once, in a different life, longed to hear. Now it was just sound. It held no weight, no power over me. I looked at her for a long, quiet moment, letting her hang in the silence of her own desperation. The entire room seemed to have faded away. I appreciate you saying that, I said, my voice calm and even. Truly, a flicker of hope, wild and pathetic, ignited in her eyes. I continued, but the man who needed to hear that apology, the one you called too sensitive, he's gone. I paused, letting the finality of those words sink in. I'm not sensitive to your words anymore, Chloe. In any sense of the word. The hope in her eyes shattered, replaced by a dawning, horrifying understanding. I was not being cruel. I was being factual. I had simply evolved beyond the frequency of her drama. Then, I delivered the masterstroke. I turned slightly to my left, to Sarah, who had been waiting with a patient, curious calm. Sarah, I said, my voice warm and normal, this is Chloe. Chloe, this is my girlfriend, Sarah. Sarah offered a small, polite smile. Hello. It was the ultimate act of indifference. The ultimate upgrade. I wasn't just rejecting her. I was demonstrating that she had been so thoroughly relegated to the past that I could now introduce her to my present with casual, social grace. The woman she had mocked and betrayed was now standing beside a man who was happy, grounded, and loved for the very depth she had ridiculed. I placed my hand gently on the small of Sarah's back. Shall we see the pieces in the next room? We turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew she was still standing there, completely and utterly dissolved, left in the devastating silence that was no longer my prison, but her permanent punishment. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.